All right, hey, what's up, everyone? Kurt here. Hope you're having a great week and start to the new year. There's a book that I recently just kind of finished, and the book that I recently finished is called The Effective Executive. It's an old school book. It's been around for about 4 decades now. It was written in the late 60s by Peter Drucker, who was a really well-known, really kind of leading guy in terms of management consultancy, and also just working with a lot of top execs. He's worked with people in the White House. He worked with some of the top execs at the largest firms in the world, like General Motors. And in the book, it's a little dry, but it's well written, and it's like one of his 25 or 30 books that he's written about management and executive effectiveness. But the book, Effective Executive, really outlines 5 underlying principles to these patterns that he's recognized over the decades of working with different executives that have made up for the sort of things that all effective executives do. And in this video, I'm going to kind of outline some of the main ones that stuck out at me and speak about some of the points that I think could really allow you to have a really productive and effective start to your 2019. So the first thing he says is all effective executives know where their time goes. And if you look at today's society, we've moved from this sort of way of working where we're no longer not executives, all of us. Essentially, every person is a knowledge worker, as he defines it, someone who is making decisions, having to kind of think in their job and in their lives and make decisions. And that's a lot of what he comes down to defining as an executive. So in a sense, we're all executives. And one of the first things he mentions is effective executives know where their time goes. They know where their time goes. They have a lot of demands on their time, and they get better and better at sort of pruning away things that don't provide value and contribution towards their sort of goals. Overall, the book is all about getting the right things done and being effective at doing them. So if you know where your time goes, which if you read in this book, he talks a lot about how people just are terrible judges. They're terrible at judging where their time actually goes and tracking it intuitively. We think we know a lot of where our time goes, but we actually don't know that much about where our time goes. And they've done studies where if they put people in a room and they close off all the windows, after a certain period of time, whether it's a half hour, hour, it's really hard for us to tell if a few hours have gone by or just a few minutes. And so you may have noticed this if you meditate and you close your eyes. Sometimes you can tell how much time has gone by. Other times, especially as you get into longer meditations where you're sitting for more than like an hour, you can really go, okay, how long has it been? So the main point is tracking time. He says focus on tracking time and then finding out where things that can be removed get removed. And I would highly suggest the app and the platform Harvest, which is specifically designed for time tracking. You can also look at some other apps out there as well, but I definitely think it's super valuable to kind of track your time. And I look at my calendar and try to kind of adhere to the things that are on my schedule, but know that time and focus on removing the things that don't actually make a contribution towards what it is you're trying to accomplish and what's meaningful to you. The other thing is, and the second point is focus on outward contribution. So the idea here is to really direct yourself towards contributing to your job, to your team, to your family, to your life in ways that are meaningful to you. So a lot of people are sort of like consumers. They're not producers of anything of value. They look at their lifestyle and they sort of look for ways to sort of stack up entertainment rather than make contributions. And in an organization, especially as an executive, when you're working on things, you really want to think about contribution and in terms of like, okay, what can I contribute? What does my team need me to contribute to be the most effective person for them I can be? Think about this when you're going into meetings. Ask yourself when you step into the meeting before you really start it, like, what sort of contribution do I want to generate and do I want this meeting to generate to move our business forward based on the sort of teams that are involved in the meetings? So think, what can I contribute? Think about it every time you're sort of stepping into any sort of situation, whether it's a sales call, an account management call, a call with your family, your friends, think about contribution. Another huge takeaway I got from this book was the idea of focusing on strengths. So a lot of times, especially in a smaller business like my company, I wouldn't say we're tiny, but we're definitely still kind of in our infancy in terms of how big I want us to be. We are focused a lot on problems and solving problems and servicing our biggest clients. What happens though is we get inward focused and we lose sight of the marketplace. We lose sight of what's going on out in the real world, and we no longer focus on sort of where the opportunities are. So you really want to focus on your strengths, not on your problems, and focus on opportunities. And that's a huge one for us because the way he outlines it, he says, if you're focused on problems, essentially you're never really going to accomplish much of anything of magnitude. But if you can focus on opportunities and channel your strengths towards those, you can actually make a major difference in the marketplace and in what you're trying to accomplish. So you focus on your strengths and you essentially starve out your weaknesses and your problems. And the only caveat to that is if you have character and integrity issues. You can't get around not building those up. But in general, you want to focus on strengths and not on weaknesses. And he uses a lot of cool examples in the book to outline the ideas around this. For example, and this is one that really stood out that he really wrote about, when Lincoln was picking his generals. One of the main generals that he picked was really known for being a great tactician in general at winning the battles, but he was terrible at he had a drinking problem, and Lincoln was like, okay, there's always good with the bad. So if you think about it, no one is perfect, and we all have strengths and we all have weaknesses. By definition, you just can't be a master in everything that you want to be, and there's no sort of well-rounded individual. There's just specialized individuals with certain strengths. So the goal here, again, with that story with Lincoln, the general would drink, and Lincoln was like, okay, well, if I knew what he drank, I would send him a barrel of what he wanted. Because again, Lincoln wasn't picking him to be a well-rounded citizen who was sober, and for sobriety, he was picking him because he could actually win battles. And previously, had picked people that were more well-rounded that just did not work out. Again, focus on your strengths. That's a huge piece of this. And one big thing that really stuck out to me was this idea that you can make decisions that are more general. And here's like an example of this. So a lot of people will make a lot of decisions throughout the day, and you get tired. You lose your willpower. It wears you down. And what Peter Drucker talks about is a lot of decisions can be made that are more global and affect more generic things. The last point he talked about that was really big was all about decisions. And this is something that I think everyone should spend time studying, because if you look at your life, it's usually a direct reflection of the decisions you've made. And most people have not spent a lot of time studying how to make good decisions or studying decision making in general. And there's a whole dialogue. The last 2 chapters are basically on making effective decisions and making the right decisions. So for example, I could make a decision that I'm not going to eat breakfast, that I'm going to fast, intermittent fast. And when I wake up every morning, I no longer need to use any willpower to decide if I'm going to have breakfast in the morning. I've already decided for the foreseeable future that I don't eat breakfast. And so for me, I'll get a glass of water and then I get ready and then I head to work, and I don't need to worry about using any sort of energy there to basically make a decision. I've already made the decision. The same thing can be said about when you go to the gym, when you do your laundry, just anything like that where you essentially, there's a pattern of making the same sort of types of decisions. You can quickly and easily just make a sort of effective decision that can cover the grounds of like what you want to do. So again, we talked about a lot of stuff here, knowing where your time goes, really kind of tracking that and seeing what you're doing. Anything you track, you can improve on, whether that's your financials, your time. There's a million things, but big things like that, like tracking money and tracking time, I would say are highly recommended. And you're going to improve on where you spend your time, where you spend your money, things like that. Focusing on outward contribution. So that means, how can you ask yourself and direct yourself to really contribute in a giving way? There's a big saying that Tony Robbins has where the secret to living is giving. If you can find ways to provide value to your partners, to the relationships that you have in your life, you're going to get a lot of value in that. And it's just going to feel rewarding. It's not even that you're doing it necessarily to get something, but you'll feel spiritually sort of fulfilled, in my experience, when you can do that. The same goes for being an executive that's effective. Focus on contribution, and that's going to point you in the direction that you want to go. The other thing is, remember to focus on your strengths. Don't worry so much unless it's a catastrophic problem. Focus on the opportunities and focus on strengths. That's going to take you there. Really channel your energy and your focus there, and the problems will starve out. Again, with the caveat that you need to make sure that if you have character and integrity issues, that you really go to work on those and tackle those. And then lastly, effective decisions. Think about places where you can define boundary conditions for decisions that can just overall encompass everything consistently. So that you're basically making a decision, and it's a blanket decision that allows you to then move on and focus your willpower and your energy and your creativity on things that might be more meaningful to you, that you can kind of move and progress towards. One more point I want to mention that I forgot to mention earlier is that when you're making decisions, it's really good to invite alternatives. A lot of people tend to want to they feel like it's good to make a decision when everyone agrees, but he outlines in the book that some of these executives were really good at consistently asking people to wait to make a decision until we got alternative ideas to, again, sort of shake things up and make sure that we've exhausted all the avenues and that we've really gotten a good perspective and understanding of the decision process. And I've started to do this a lot more in my business and in the way I operate when I'm thinking about a decision. Like, okay, well, that seems like the totally right decision, but what about this one? And what I find is if I can kind of like interject in some maybe extreme alternatives and try to justify them when I interject them, so I'm not just throwing in a random alternative for the sake of it, it opens up my mind. And an open mind can receive knowledge, it can receive perspective, it can grow. Whereas if you're closed off and you're really just focused on this one thing, it may not be where you want to go. So anyways, it's a lot, it's pretty dense. It's a bit of a drier read, but there's a lot of great examples in there. With anything, like I think if you watch summaries like this, it's great and you get the main points, but do read the book because a lot of the points in the book, it's a simple 5-point book that really spends a lot of time outlining the points to help you understand how important it is to really just to drill home these principles, because I think we all want to be really effective. We want to do the things that we want to do, and we don't want to spend time and waste efforts on things that maybe aren't as productive and effective. So, hope that was helpful. Let me know what you guys think if you've ever read the book. I'd love to hear your feedback. If you have other books around being an effective executive or just being productive in that realm, I'm kind of on that sort of track right now. I'd love to hear your feedback. And as always, keep crushing.